Eyewitness News presents Newsmakers with your hosts, Jayne and Bugda and Andy Mehalshick.
Hello and welcome to Newsmakers. I'm Andy Mehalshick.
And I'm Jayne and Bugda. The focus of our conversation today is court-appointed special advocates, or CASA Volunteers. They are a special group of dedicated people who are the voice for abused and neglected children.
We'll discuss their roles and the need for more volunteers. We'll also learn how the pandemic has impacted that organization. We'll introduce you to our guest, and our discussion begins when Newsmakers returns right after this.
Welcome back to Newsmakers. I'm Jayne Ann Bugda along with Andy Mehalshick, and the topic of our conversation is CASA Volunteers. They are a dedicated group of people who are the voice of children in court, children who are abused or neglected. And it's interesting to know, because Andy and I were talking about this, that they were scheduled to be on with us right before the pandemic start weighing in on the way we do things in life. So they are here today to talk a little bit about what they do, and they do have a very special role in our community.
And it's interesting, even though the pandemic really hit the entire nation and our area very hard in so many ways, this group has not missed a beat, and they're helping out all these children and their families throughout the past year, and they continue to do so.
Right, so we are joined today by, from CASA of Luzerne County, John Aciukewicz, who's an attorney, John Aciukewicz, who's the executive director, and Suzanne Kapral, who's a CASA volunteer advocate. And we want to thank you both for being with us today to talk about what CASA does and the special role it plays in our community. So thank you both for being with us.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to be here.
I guess we want to start off by explaining what is a court-appointed special advocate. Tell us a little bit about the program.
Well, we began with the steering committee in 2012, and our first training class was in 2013. So we are a nonprofit child advocacy organization for the community serving Luzerne County children. And as you've mentioned in the intro, those children who have been already determined by the court to be without proper care by their parents or caregivers, either because of sexual abuse, physical abuse, or neglect, where they've had inadequate food or housing, or their medical needs have been neglected. But you know, we can unwrap a lot about our advocates through those four words of court-appointed special advocates. First of all, court-appointed. We are an independent resource for the judge to assist the judge in making recommendations for the safety and best interests of the children. And we think our advocates are special, like Suzanne, because they're volunteers. They are doing this for one primary reason. You know, they want to make a difference in a child's life. They want to help change a child's story. And then thirdly, with regard to what are they advocating for? You know, there are three primary things: that a child be safe, that a child experience a permanent home, and that a child have the opportunity to thrive just as quickly as possible. So that, in a nutshell, just shares briefly about what court-appointed special advocates are about. But I think the most important thing, too, is that when a judge appoints an advocate to a case, it's to one case and one child or one sibling group. That one-to-one connection is just so huge and so necessary in these cases that we can talk more about as we continue the conversation. But that's just briefly who we are and what we do.
And how many children are in need of an advocate out there, and how many advocates are out there? I mean, do they line up, or is there a need for more volunteers?
Well, there are about 500 Luzerne County children in foster care placement because of abuse or neglect. You know, 3 years ago we had 18 active advocates serving 25 children. You know, thankfully we now have 50 active advocates serving 70 children, but that's just under 15% of the population of children in foster care. So we are continuously looking to increase our number of volunteer advocates so that we can serve more children. You know, that's truly what our mission is about, to provide every child suffering from abuse and neglect with an advocate.
And, you know, volunteers are needed, and they do play a special role. Suzanne, tell us a little bit about why you got involved with the program, and tell us a little bit about your experience as a CASA volunteer.
Okay, sure. Yes, thank you. I became aware of the CASA program for Luzerne County really when it was launched, as John said, back in 2012. And I became very interested in learning more about the type of advocacy and the services that are provided. I became increasingly interested in becoming an advocate. And I got to the point where I just could not any longer read about one more child who was beaten or starved or was living in horrible conditions. And I thought to myself, you know, Suzanne, you've been reading about these for years, and now it's time to do something. And that was really the catalyst within myself. So I picked up the phone and I made a phone call and I sat down with John, and I knew pretty much immediately that this was going to be the path that I wanted to choose, and that I was going to dedicate pretty much the rest of my life being an advocate for children here in Luzerne County.
And with this pandemic, of course, impacting virtually every aspect of our lives and our society, my understanding is that advocates spend time or try to make contact with the child to build a relationship. How has the pandemic impacted that factor, this whole operation?
Well, for me, it's been interesting. I mean, prior to the pandemic, I was able to spend time with my CASA kiddo one-on-one, and we would do things in person. We would go to the park, we would go out to dinner, we would spend time together getting to know one another and to really build a strong bond and a trust where we could communicate openly with one another. Since the pandemic, obviously things have changed, and we do have communication. The majority of the communication still is using technology. So whether it's video conferencing, whether it's FaceTime, just talking on the phone, we have face-to-face interactions. So we still get to see each other, but it's just not as it was before the pandemic. But that commitment is still there to keep the lines of communication open and flowing in both directions.
You know, when we talk about the group that is involved with CASA, you know, we understand that you're with children. So what type of requirements, what is the criteria for becoming a volunteer?
That's a good question, because on paper, the requirements are not that stringent. At least be 21 years of age, a high school diploma or GED, and obviously pass all the necessary background clearances. And I'm sure Suzanne can talk more about this as well, but you know, we interact with so many different participants in the child's life, from judges to birth parents. So obviously having the ability to communicate is very important, to withhold biases and judgments about families and children and life circumstances, because most of our advocates are going to experience things that they may not have experienced before, be in circumstances they haven't been in before. They have to have a tremendous amount of empathy and compassion, and primarily a sense of commitment. You know, that's one of the things that we stress so much with our volunteer advocates, because when a child enters the foster care system, not only have they experienced abuse or neglect, which is traumatic in and of itself, but once they enter the foster care system, it's sadly a path of instability and uncertainty for a variety of reasons. So when the judge appoints one of our volunteer advocates to a case, we expect and want that volunteer advocate to remain with that child's case and with that child from the time of appointment until the time the judge decides that child's experienced permanency. And that could be 1 year, 2 years, some cases more than that. And it's an intense volunteer experience. So I if anything, I would say the ability to make that commitment, as Suzanne has, for now going on 3 years.
When Suzanne or John, when the process, as you're moving forward with the process and the child is no longer in the court system, do you maintain contact with that child, or is that an option for the child or the family?
Yes, it's an option for the child only. Our responsibility as a court-appointed special advocate ends once the case has been closed by the court and permanency has been established. However, in many instances, if the child wishes to maintain contact, then they certainly can. And you know, we recently had an adoption, and the 10-year-old boy said to his advocate, you know, when I'm adopted, will I still be able to see you? And of course, you know, he will if he chooses to. So it really is case by case.
I can imagine that it's such a special bond that you create with this child after they're in such a come out of such difficult situations. Talk a little bit about that bond. Suzanne, that you've had with the child that you've been assigned to?
Absolutely, yes. There is a bond, and that bond is built on trust. And as I mentioned before, it's two-way communication. And what we have to understand when you are a CASA is you are in court the voice for that child. So it is so much more than hanging out with a child and just trying to get to know the child. There is a trust that you have. And that child needs to feel safe and confident that he or she can communicate to you and share things that maybe that he or she isn't even going to share to the foster parents or to a caseworker. So it really is important, as John said, to have that commitment and for that child to know you are the anchor. I'm the anchor for my one child, and I'm not going anywhere, and I will be there as long as she needs me to be there. And you know, when we have this ability, because we are court appointed and we really are the communicator to the court, to the judge, we also have the ability to speak in confidence with any social worker, with any counselor, with any physician, with any dentist, with any eye doctor, a teacher, a guidance counselor at school. And the whole idea is you are taking all of these pieces of this child's life and you're putting it together. So you may have access to much more than a caseworker may have or the foster family will. So attention to detail is so important. Patience is so important. As John said, no bias. I mean, you really cannot come to any conclusion on your own that, you know, you want to try to make a case go which way or another way. We are here to advocate for what is in the best interest of the child. And with that, as John says, takes a commitment, but it really is life-changing.
And that really, Suzanne, has to be that bond, and you know what they've been through. And describe the dynamic in court when you, for example, say maybe a first court hearing or court appearance of some sort. What's the dynamic? What's going through your mind emotionally, professionally, and with that child? How you're in that together? Describe that dynamic if you can.
That's a great question. And I can tell you about my first time that I was in court, and I was nervous because I wanted to make sure that I was doing the right thing and saying the right thing. And, you know, I had my report prepared, and of course, CASA takes a look at everything, and everybody has, you know, the same report that I'm submitting to the court. And I just wanted to make sure that I was representing her interest the best way possible. And the thing is, once you get up there and you're sworn in and you are sitting next to the judge on the bench and you start to just communicate and tell the story and share experiences with that child. There are cases when she has been in the court with me. There are cases when she has not been in the courtroom with me. But you understand the seriousness. You know, sometimes people hear the term volunteer and they think that it's not taken seriously. No, you are called upon, and the judge, as well as all the attorneys and everyone else in that courtroom, listens to everything you say, and what you say has weight. So there is a definite seriousness and professionalism that's mandated for this type of work.
And Suzanne, if I can, because sometimes people think the court system is black and white, and that's, you know, it's right, wrong, left, right, whatever. But I would think the whole human condition, human dynamic comes to play in here as well as your training.
Absolutely. Yes, it does. And it's not black and white. And, you know, you could think that you've got this case and it's going to be a slam dunk. It's going to be easy. The outcome is just, we could see the outcome, but there are going to be so many twists and turns that happen in this entire process. And you just need to be ready that no matter what happens, that child knows that you were there for that child. So yeah, nothing is black and white in the court system, not at all.
And while we were talking, we were showing some of the swearing in of some of the CASA volunteers over the years. But I do want to talk a little bit about the training. What type of training do you go to? What are the hours you have to put in? And what type of commitment for training do you have to make as a volunteer?
Well, right now, we're doing it virtually to accommodate, obviously, COVID concerns, but we follow a curriculum that's designed by the National CASA organization out of Seattle, Washington. And right now we're doing 9 consecutive Wednesdays, and they're 3-hour blocks. So our spring training class begins on Wednesday, March 10th. It'll be for 9 consecutive weeks. And we'll also include courtroom observation, and then we'll do another fall training, generally at the end of September. So we'll cover topics like the role of the CASA, the foster care system, educational advocacy, mental health, domestic violence, substance abuse, cultural awareness, some of the foundational subject areas, if you will, that our CASAs may get exposed to. But as I'm sure Susan can attest, it's when you get your first case that you really learn what it's like to be a CASA and what that's involved with. So we just provide a bit of a foundation, but it's roughly 30 hours of training, pre-service.
And then after you go through the training, then they take you to court, and then you're sworn in by a judge as an advocate, correct?
Suzanne, do you want to talk about that?
Yes, you absolutely. Yes. So you go to court, you are sworn in, and I received a case shortly after that I was sworn in, and John's so right. You go through this intensive training and you get exposed to so many areas, and there's a lot of role playing, and you're looking at case studies. So there's always that theory versus reality. And so you've got that base because you have the training. But once you start, you have a child and it's like, hi, I'm Suzanne, and hi, I'm so-and-so. And, you're introduced, and you're really starting at the basic level of building a trusting relationship with that child. And if there's one thing that I am so grateful for is at any time, no matter what, and I actually did this on Christmas Eve, I was able to have a conversation with my supervisor at CASA. So they are available. They're available on email, phone call, text, whatever. And it seems that, they just don't clock out at 5 o'clock, which is really important because sometimes you come across things that you need help with, or you need an answer for, or even you just need to talk because you're trying to work through things. So the support system at CASA is just fantastic.
Well, we are going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we are going to continue our conversation. I want to remind everyone that we have information on today's program on pahomepage.com. We're under the Newsmakers link, and you can learn more about CASA and how to become a volunteer. You're watching Newsmakers, and we are a proud recipient of 3 Pennsylvania Association of Broadcasting Awards for excellence in public affairs programming, and we'll be back right after this. Welcome back to Newsmakers. Jayne and Bugda along with Andy Mehalshick. Our topic today is CASA of Luzerne County, court-appointed special advocates. On our webpage, pahomepage.com, under the Newsmakers link, we have much more information, including a very powerful public service announcement that's running on Eyewitness News during the breaks. You have to see it. It's very powerful, very compelling, and I think it will inspire a lot of people to become a volunteer. We are joined by John Aciukewicz and Suzanne Kapral, and we are talking with them about their roles with CASA. And I want to ask quickly, we were talking about the different children. Do you represent children who are toddlers or maybe nonverbal, infants? What type of, do they get a CASA volunteer if needed in court?
I can first tell you generally, and then Susan can talk briefly about, the case that she also has. But yes, we've had children from as young as a few months old up to age 21. And we've had children that have been on the autism spectrum. We've had children that have experienced medical needs. So it's the role is, in addition to having contact with the child, being in contact with everyone else that is in contact with that child, whether it be birth parents, foster parents, physicians, counselors, therapists. So the role is, as Suzanne described earlier, to assess as much information as you can about that child so you can make a fact-based, objective report with recommendations to the judge. So yes, we have certainly had children under the age of 5, and that's what Suzanne currently has right now.
Yes, I do. I'm also advocating for a little boy. He is 3 years old, and I received his case right before the pandemic hit. So we had one in-home visit with his foster parents, and following that, everything is pretty much been virtual. So, it's a little bit tough with the 3-year-old. They have a lot of energy and they don't necessarily want to sit around all the time and just look at a screen and talk to this person on the other side of the screen that he hardly knows. So what I did in the beginning to build a relationship with him is the best I could is I got creative. And the second time that we had a video conference, I brought my parrot. And I just had my parrot Bart with me, and that immediately got his attention, and he was just like, wow. And he started talking about a bird that he knew. So there was a really good way to make a connection there. So, it's a little bit different as far as the other case that I have, because the girl that I have that I advocate for is 10 years old. So communication is easier, and we had more face-to-face communication. But in this case, I spent a lot of time observing this child and seeing the child in his foster home and watching interactions and really just kind of looking at his face and reading his face. So, the attention span just isn't there. So if I can get 10, 12, 15 minutes with him face to face, that's a lot. And I'm happy for that. But it's different when you have someone who's younger, especially in circumstances like this, when you're really depending on the technology to have those visits.
And like they say, especially younger kids, at least in my life experience, kids are brutally honest, especially younger kids. I mean, there's no filter, and you could probably tap in. Suzanne, can you tap into that in the process, knowing that, especially younger kids, that you can really make an impact on their life and really get information out of them and find out where they're hurting and that kind of thing because they're so young.
Yeah, the children are definitely brutally honest. I think the best thing is when I am with this child, with this 3-year-old, I just want him to feel good when he sees me on the other end. So if I can do things where, and it's even talking about toys or something, or the dog or anything, it's so he sees me as someone who helps him relax and just kind of want to open up and communicate. And they do that in different ways.
I do want to touch upon, how are you funded? I know you have a number of fundraisers coming up. Let's talk a little bit about some of that and how you're funded.
Right. So we are a nonprofit 501c3. We don't receive any, local, state, or federal, tax dollars. We rely primarily on grants through foundations, individual and corporate contributions, and fundraising events. So we're really excited about our spring event. That'll be the 4th annual NEPA Sings event. It's sort of patterned after The Voice. So it's a great opportunity to bring local talent together who have a gift and the ability to sing solo. And we're excited that this year, because we're trying to navigate through COVID still, we're going to record the performances and then broadcast them at the Garden Drive-In in June. I think it's going to be just a fun night, and it's something different that we just want to continue to energize the community and let people know that we're out there, we're still in business, and to support us as best they can and still have some fun with a very serious, obviously a very serious topic of child abuse and neglect. And
John, Suzanne, if I can go back to what Suzanne talked about at the very beginning of this program, we all see things, these horrendous stories, we report on them, we cover them, we see them, and I think a lot of people say, boy, that is sad. They feel frustrated, they can't do anything. But this is really a program people can make a difference in. They really can do something to help the kids out, maybe just make a difference in their community. Yeah, we often, when we come back from court on a case, we'll talk about it, and we'll say, wow, this case with the CASA and this case without a CASA, can you imagine what the difference would have been? And I think if I could impart any message to those that are listening, first of all, if you could just sense the passion and the enthusiasm and the energy that Suzanne brings to our program to this case, it causes me to believe that, never underestimate the difference that one person can make in a child's life. There's such a need right now in our community, but there's such an impact that can be had. And I think Suzanne just exemplifies that so well. And maybe, Suzanne, you can just speak a little bit further about that and make that appeal to others, perhaps.
Absolutely. And, male and female, both are needed, and there's a lot of little boys out there. There's so many boys in foster care that could really benefit from having a bail, and we still match up. I'm not saying that just because you're a boy you're only going to get a male, you're not going to get a female. That's not it at all. But there's just something to be said too about the role and the strength, that the positive influence that males as well as the female advocates can have on these children. And what John said is you really can make a difference. You can change the life of a child. And in some cases, you are the only person that child is going to trust, because the child has gone through so much trauma. I mean, if they're removed from the home, it's for a reason. And they need someone, they need an anchor, and they need to know that someone cares, and they need to know that what's going on in their life is not their fault. They didn't cause it. And they need to know that they're valued and they matter and they belong. Well, and you can do that.
Well, John and Suzanne, I think you have inspired a lot of people today, and we hope that if someone's watching this, they give you a call, if they can volunteer in some way, if they can look forward to becoming a volunteer at your next session. We have that information on our website, pahomepage.com, under the Newsmakers link. We want to thank you both for the work that you do and how you serve our community and the children in our community.
A big thank you again, and we have so many good people in northeastern Pennsylvania. You're among them for sure, and thank you for your service.
Well, for Andy Mehalshick and everyone behind the scenes, I'm Jayne Bugda. Thank you for making Newsmakers part of your day, and we'll talk again next time.